Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's largest platform for entrepreneurs. Anything and everything that matters to you, the entrepreneur, we've got it covered here on the show. For the past couple of months and going forward as well, we're going to continue on the pandemic. What does it mean for you? How has business been affected for India's small businesses? And also, how are India's businesses responding to this crisis? Today, we're focusing on one specific sector, and that's logistics. One of those industries and sectors that perhaps has not been as badly hit as some others. I'm in conversation with one leader from the logistics space, asking him what the pandemic has meant for him and also what really the way forward is looking like for small players when it comes to this crisis. Let's welcome in Anshuman Singh, Chairman and MD, Stellar Value Chain Solutions. Anshuman, thanks for taking the time to join us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow. I was just giving a very brief introduction as far as the logistics space and industry in India is concerned. My question to you is, even before I ask you for your advice in terms of what small businesses should be doing when it comes to the next couple of months for the rest of FY21, I want to do a quick look back and really talk about what 2020 meant for you personally and professionally, given, of course, that businesses and industries like yours had to respond quickly to a scenario and a situation that no one had any idea how to respond to. What's that really been like for you?
Sunanda, thank you for having me here. So it's been a roller coaster ride for the last 12 months, and there's a huge difference between the first wave and the second wave as far as the supply chain and logistics is concerned. Last year when the lockdown happened, it happened overnight. The PM gave one call and the whole nation ground to a halt in one single day. Every single part of the entire value chain for all industries, right from manufacturing to supplies to stores to shopping to retail, everything stopped. So in a way, the entire supply chain came to a halt at one shot. So as a result, there were no waves in the whole value chain or the supply chain. Everything was stopped. So everything was stopped. So businesses fell down. There was a crash in the revenues of every single business. Only the essentials and groceries and FMCGs were allowed. But everything else came to one single stop. And as a result, the supply chains last year were managed better because for 2 months, everything was shut. And after that, everything started opening. In the second wave, the lockdowns have been very, very different. There's no complete lockdown. In fact, most of the states are not even calling it a lockdown, although it's a near lockdown. So manufacturing this time is completely allowed. Warehousing for essentials and e-commerce has been largely allowed. As a result, this time in the second wave, the supply chain challenges have been higher. The reason being there have been inconsistencies across the supply chain. Manufacturing is happening, but consumption is not happening. As a result, the inventories are either piling at the manufacturing locations or are piling at the intermediate storage locations. Now that's creating chaos in terms of inventory planning. That is creating chaos in terms of transportation planning. That is creating uncertainties in terms of space planning for every player in the whole supply chain, right from the vendors to the original manufacturers or the brand manufacturers, to the supply chain players, to the warehousing play, to the transportation play. So the whole supply chain has been very uncertain this time. It has led to a lot of fluctuations. And that is why the second round has been difficult. As far as we are concerned, personally we are concerned, the company's employees are concerned, the first wave was more difficult for us because we were still out in the field serving essential goods. And I can tell you that happily we are all fine today. But last year, half the senior management fell prey to COVID. Half the senior management was down because we were still serving all our customers, all our corporates, especially in the e-commerce space, through the essential goods, and we fell prey. Most of the other industries went to work from home and they were able to save themselves. However, on the other hand, this year, our half the senior management already had COVID last year. So this year we were far better prepared. But from on the corporate side, we saw it, the second wave affect a lot of people. I think not many people were prepared. Nobody was prepared. This came as a sudden shocker. We had thought we had gone past COVID, and then it came with a vengeance. And I think this time the corporates have also been affected big time despite the work from home. And that has resulted to a lot of change and shifts in the business side, on the corporate side, in the planning cycles, in the new business cycles, in the import cycles, in the entire business chain. And on the consumption market, the shops were completely closed for the last 1.5 months, despite no clear lockdown being declared. Shops were closed, cases were at an all-time high. So all in all, the second wave has hit harder, has created more uncertainty than the first wave, but everybody is hoping that it will also pass faster. Last year we were completely hit for first 2 months. Everybody was hit for first 2 months. Then the next 4 months was gradual opening, and then there was a lot of catch up. This year we hope that the entire hit for everybody will be only for these 1.5, 2 months, and by the second half of June we look at the market opening up across the chain, and we hope that all the businesses, all the supply chain players are prepared to catch up quickly.
So, as an industry and a company, how did you really respond to the pandemic, Anshuman?
So I'm sure a lot of people did a lot of good work across industries and across companies last year. But one of the things that helped us, see, we are in the supply chain business, specifically Stellar Value Chain is in the supply chain business, is in the value chain transformation business. And we have created a core DNA for ourselves, one of the elements of which is warrior spirit. We had hard coded that DNA in our value system right from the beginning. That DNA actually helped us in this COVID pandemic, because a warrior spirit is one who resolves conflict, and warrior spirit is one which enables that. Of course, when we built this DNA in our company 2 years ago, we had no clue that something like a pandemic will hit us. But when this came, we needed all the warrior spirit that we could muster to get our people on the ground, because at a warehousing location where there are 500 people, if 50 people are testing positive, the remaining 450 don't want to work. So we had to invoke all the warrior spirit available inside us. We had to motivate them. We had to increase the cost. So in pandemic, everybody is trying to reduce costs, but believe me, when such an unplanned thing happens, costs initially are bound to go high. So in terms of RT-PCR tests, right now in the second wave, the vaccination, in terms of the thermal checks, in terms of sanitization, at any warehouse, at the start of a shift, 500 people lining up for thermal checks and sanitization. Believe me, there's a half an hour to 1 hour productivity loss. So our total manpower costs have gone up by 15% to 20% because of RT-PCR vaccination and queuing up across each shift. So costs have gone up, and not everybody can absorb such higher costs in such a pandemic, and that's why a lot of small players are struggling. Larger players like us have been able to absorb a large, some of the large. We work for large customers, so large customers have been able to absorb these costs. But smaller businesses, smaller supply chain players have found it very, very tough. On the driver side, there was a phenomenal shortage of drivers in the second wave, because a lot of the drivers caught COVID this time. Because COVID for the first time hit the rural areas this time. And drivers come from hinterland, they stop on the way, on the routes to visit their homes. And this time a large number of drivers were hit. So the driver availability became a big challenge in between. Freight rates went through the roof only because of the driver availability issue. On top of that, diesel is at an all-time high. The fuel prices are absolutely at record-breaking highs, because of which there was a huge fluctuation in the freight rates despite the demand being low. So it was a very strange situation. When the demand is low, the supply should be high and the prices should go down. But this was not the time. This time the demand was low because the markets were shut, but drivers were not available. Fuel was at an all-time high. The demand was not equal on both sides. And as a result, freight rates shot up. In fact, a lot of small transporters have gone out of business in this pandemic because they could not absorb the variability and the shock that this pandemic unleashed in the second wave. Uh, Players like us, players like Stellar, we have been able to survive the second wave because we invested heavily on people management, on the sanitation, health of the talent, on the workers across the system. We invested heavily. We
Sure.
also invested heavily on the technology side.
Sure.
What do you mean by technology? So, classical old school transportation system technology was not enabled. Even things as simple as a GPS, which is now available on your mobile, is also not applicable to the small transporters. But players like us, we had the GPS systems. We were able to monitor trucks. We were also able to monitor if some driver fell sick on the way and had stopped at somewhere. We had to make alternate arrangements so that the truck could be taken over by another backup driver and then moved on the way so that the businesses of our customers don't suffer. But that's not something that small transporters were able to do. So this time was a very, very challenging time. Things are improving now. Last 1 or 2 weeks have been phenomenally better. But I think this time people are far more cautious and conscious than the last time.
Anshuman, I have to take a quick commercial break. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow and Tonight. We're focusing on the logistics market all of this week. I'm in conversation tonight with Anshuman Singh of Stellar Value Chain. You were just talking about the increased cost for a business like yourself, and therefore, the proportional and incremental increase in cost for a small business. What should a small business do in this scenario, and your advice for them really?
So India is a country where even today in the logistics sector, only 10% is organized and 90% is unorganized. Events like this will make a shift from the unorganized to the organized, but even at its best, in the next 3, 4, 5 years, the organized sector, that means the large players with a lot of systems, processes, talent, people, infra, and technology, they will at the most occupy 20% of the total logistics market even after 3, 4, 5 years. So 80% will continue to be unorganized, and unorganized consists of all the small players. Now, for those players to overcome such bumps, I have some things to say. One is that today technology is completely democratized. I think every single person at any strata in society now uses technology on their mobiles. GPS systems, map traffic systems, tracking, routing are things that everybody now uses these days. So the smaller transporters, they definitely now need to put track and trace systems in their trucks, small, medium, or large. That will enable them visibility of their trucks. In fact, if they're small owners, they own 3, 4 trucks, it will also enable them to track the drivers from various perspectives, from a utilization of the asset perspective, as well as from the tracking of the driver perspective, not specifically for the purpose of tracking, but in today's time, we need to track the driver from a health perspective, that everything is fine, they are on the way, because the journeys on the long haul are quite long. They can be as long as 48 hours to 72 hours to 96 hours on certain routes. And with these uncertainties, it is important for the small owners who own 4, 5, 7 trucks to keep a track of their vehicles. They should also now have systems for basic sanitation, basic temperatures. They do not cost much. There needs to be some discipline that the smaller players also now need to bring. So what I am saying is that smaller players also now need to incrementally improve their service offerings and raise the bar. And they will have to do it, because if they have to do well, they will have to do it.
One of the big criticisms of the logistics market and industry is the fact that it is very complex. There are too many organizations, too many industries, too many, bodies that are really involved in the entire logistics, industry and market. The national logistics policy to some extent is hoping, and it is hoped will simplify that. Of course, the national logistics policy, it's going to take some time to really come in. But are you hopeful that there will be a lot of clarity on ground once that happens?
So national logistics policy is a long-term policy. It is not going to have any impact in the immediate run, uh, in the pandemic era or in the next 1 or 2 years. It's a long-term policy. There's a lot that has to be done. There's a lot being done. The government is doing a lot on the infra side. They are on the coastal shipping side, on the river waterways side, on the rail side, on the road infrastructure side. A lot is happening. They are thinking of making logistics parks at various locations in the country. They're making dedicated freight corridors. They're making the Sagamala project. All that is a part of the national logistics policy. Uh, a lot of skill development is being done in this sector, but the national logistics policy is a long-term change. A lot of players will have to do it on their own, and incorporate whatever they do as a part of the national logistics policy thought process. For example, even when the NLP was not there, we have already decided to go pan-India, build 21 cities, make 40 large logistic parks integrated with 20,000 pin codes, with a 50 million square feet warehousing and a 50,000 truck pan-India infrastructure. Now we built this design when even the national logistics policy was not even in the draft stage. And I think all large players should look at the larger picture ahead of time, because India is on the cusp in a post-GST era of major transformation on the supply chain side over the next 10 years across all sectors. The national logistics policy will be a big booster, but waiting for it to happen is not perhaps the best way to do it. Every company on the supply chain side, every company on the corporate side, both the sides will have to come together, work on it, build the infra, build the systems. We are already doing it with a lot of e-commerce companies. We are doing it with a lot of auto companies. We are doing it with a lot of retail and lifestyle companies. Similarly, other players can also do it. And the national logistics policy will plug into it and actually make the difference. But the government on its own part is actually building phenomenal infrastructure, which should yield results in the next 3 to 5 years.
So, what, in your opinion, should the government do to simplify things, Anshuman? Because, one of the reasons why things take so long to really move when it comes to logistics, the logistics market, whether it is a small player or a large player, is the fact that there are so many layers really when it comes to this market. How should the government look at simplifying?
Ideally speaking, if we have to apply for shops and establishment licenses or food and drug licenses to operate the supply chain system across the country in every single state. So we are dealing with 30 different states for n number of different licenses with multiple permutation and combinations. It becomes thousands of licenses to be applied for and thousands of compliances to be done for. Ideally speaking, if we could have a single framework, a single body, a single nodal point, and a single platform where everything could be applied for and approved, I think it would make life simple for everybody and anybody. I mean, if the government can run a 130 crore people vaccination program on a single platform called COVID, and it's working pretty fine despite all the noise around it. I've had great experience about it. I think it's not so complex to have one single nodal agency if the government has the will. A single nodal agency which can actually combine all the supply chain licenses, logistic licenses. Right now, they are being treated as state subjects. We have to apply in every single state. Actually, supply chain and logistics is a pan-India subject. It should not be a state subject. It should be a concurrent subject where the state and the center work together, and a single nodal agency which can allow all licenses, all permits, all help, all people employment, all logistics sector employment, all schemes, all projects, and all public-private partnerships on a single platform. That would be a dream platform.
So then your advice for small businesses who are watching today's interview, given that we might just be coming off the peak of the second wave, but we're possibly, and by all accounts, definitely looking at a third wave. We are definitely better prepared for the second wave, as you've been pointing out, but it looks like it's going to be the second half, at least maybe of next year, before we can finally go back to whatever that normal is looking like. So what's your advice?
Hard work, warrior spirit, righteousness, and persistence will make all the small players, medium players, and the large players succeed even in a difficult environment as the pandemic. So all the best to all the players. I'm sure Indian logisticians are strong warriors. They will overcome it and win the game.
Anshuman, thanks so much for your time. Completely out of time on today's episode, but do stay tuned the whole of this week. We're going to continue focusing on the logistics market. What you, the entrepreneur, should know, what you should be putting in place, and also what you should keep in mind when it comes to ramping up your capabilities in this space. If you have any questions for us, shoot them at us. Our details on your screens as we speak. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.